This is The Resilient Life, where we believe that every human will struggle in this life. Our challenge is to struggle well. I'm Ryan Manion. I lost my brother to war, my mom to cancer, and I'm the daughter of a retired Marine. I'm also a wife, mom, author, and president of one of the nation's leading veteran service organizations. Join me and some incredible guests as we explore the value of struggling well through life's inevitable challenges. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Resilient Life podcast. I'm so happy to have my friend Chase Millsap on the show with us today. Chase is the director of a documentary that is just about to be released, Small Town Strong. And with him is Dale King, who runs PSKC CrossFit. And before we kind of kick into the story and why you guys are here and really the meat of what we want to get down and talk to, I'd love to just because Chase shared with me a little bit about how you guys met. And so I'd love to start with how the two of you came to be. So backstory, you guys are both veterans. Dale served in the Army. Chase served in, I think, every service branch there was.
The Air Force wouldn't take me, but yes.
Except for the Air Force. But, you know, your story is kind of unique about how you came together. So let's just kind of start there and then we'll go from there. Thanks for being on.
So there I was. A really good friend of mine was saying, hey, I asked, whatever happened to Miley? Miley was a girl that I grew up with in Portsmouth. And our mutual friend was like, yeah, she married a dude who says he's like a Marine / Special Forces in California. So like my stolen valor radar was just pinging left and right. And I was like, oh, is he like a sniper Navy SEAL too? Why is that?
Yeah.
So that's the first time I heard about Chase. And then fast forward, I'm out in Hollywood filming an episode for Shark Tank, and they're like, hey, that Chase dude married Miley. Like, they would love to meet you guys and have tacos. And I'm thinking, all right, well, I don't really want to have to call this guy out in front of, his wife and our mutual friend. So we go to eat tacos, and there he is. And I was trying to like tactfully fish around to get to and I was like, wait a minute, dude, you graduated from the Naval Academy, was a Marine officer, quit that to, go to the Q course to become a Special Forces officer. And sure as shit, it checked out because we were actually in Iraq around the same time, and we're bouncing names off like, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so. And it was just like, since that day, like we instantly became best friends.
And Miley told me a little bit about Dale. She said that she had gone into the same group to prom with him. So I immediately didn't like him either. And this was not supposed to happen. And then he was nice about it, but he was subtly, that first meeting, he was like, let's be honest, you're lying. You're stolen valor. And I was like, nah, it was a long story. But I did actually go from the Navy to the Marines to the Green Berets, which was not the plan, by the way.
Dale, I will tell you that when I first met Chase, I was introduced to him and, oh, this is Chase. He's an Army veteran. And I'm like, oh, okay. And Chase, I remember actually, we were outside a bar smoking a cigarette.
There you go.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Many, many years ago when that was my vice. And I said, oh, where'd you go to college? And he said, the Naval Academy. And I'm like, wait, what? And you're an Army veteran? He's like, well, I was also a Marine. So I had the same, like, what? Who's this dude?
Yeah.
But, so you guys linked up. You're out pitching on Shark Tank for it's a skincare, correct?
Yeah, it's a all natural skincare and grooming company called Doc Spartan.
Yes. So love the name Spartan. I like how you bring Spartan into kind of all your different business acquisitions. But what happens is, Dale, you're deployed. You serve close to 10 years in the Army. You come back to your small town in Ohio, and you alluded that it was like The Walking Dead. And, tell us a little bit about that, because, this is at the height of well, not even the height, maybe the beginning of the opioid epidemic. And it was fascinating to watch the transition from where your town started. And, I guess that was in like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and then where it was when you got back from deployment. So tell us a little bit about that journey and reacclimating into your community and what you were seeing.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Spartan. The reason Spartan's in everything is in the late 20s and early 30s, there was a NFL team called the Portsmouth Spartans
Right.
in Portsmouth, Ohio. They were one of the original NFL teams, and they would later go on to be sold to Detroit, and they are now the Detroit Lions. So that kind of tells you like how big industrialized the town was back in the day. From all the way kind of up into the 70s, when the industrial base started leaving the United States, Portsmouth, just like a lot of Rust Belt towns, was hit pretty hard economically. So you kind of had a population devoid of economic opportunity, but one guy figured out a really phenomenal business model, and that was the pain clinic pill mill business model. And unfortunately, Portsmouth is kind of known for the first physician who ever created the pill mill business model was in Portsmouth. Wow. And that was around the mid 90s. So how that works is around that same time, Purdue Pharma started manufacturing Oxycontin, which, as we all know now, is essentially chemically similar to heroin.
Yeah.
So this guy figured out a way that he essentially had an endless supply of heroin, and then he could charge people cash, 100, 150, 200 bucks to come in. And a lot of these guys and gals used to be former coal miners, factory workers who, did have chronic pain issues. So 150 bucks later, you get a pill of Oxycontin and feel better. The only problem is that created an entire generation of opioid addicted population here in Portsmouth and kind of throughout Appalachia. So I left in '99, went to college, somehow graduated college and picked up a commission along the way, and then spent a couple deployments to Iraq, and around 10 years later came home. And it was not the place that I had left. So from like 99 to 07 was really the height of the pill mill pain clinic epidemic.
Yeah.
I came home and there were 12 pain clinics in Scioto County. My county is 70,000 people. And so that's just 12 different businesses owned by doctors just writing scripts. I actually looked it up the other day. From 2006 to 2014, there were close to 47 million pain pills prescribed in Scioto County.
Whoa.
So that's that's what I came home to. And it was just, trading one war zone for the other.
Now you've seen Dope Sick or Painkiller, those TV shows.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're talking about, right? The doctors would give, basically write the scripts out and get people addicted, and you could see it, and it was legal at the time.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Well, and I've often talked about, I had on a guy, Zach Clark, who's actually won the Bachelorette. But he is a recovering opioid addict, and he got hooked on opioids because he had a brain tumor. So this wasn't a guy that was going out and, searching out recreational drugs. And we were having this conversation because, it's so easy to see. And I love how you guys talk about in the documentary that like, this is devoid of like your socioeconomic status, like it getting hooked on pain pills. It's just really like the accessibility to them. I had 3 C-sections I've got 3 kids. I had 3 C-sections. The first one I had, they automatically were just pumping me with oxy. It was like every 4 hours, take this. You got to stay ahead of the pain. And I became terrified of the pain of like, because in my head, it was like, if I don't take this, this pain is going to come. And they would always say, stay ahead of the pain, stay ahead of the pain. And I came home. I shared this story on that episode. I came home from the hospital, still taking those oxy. And every 4 hours was setting an alarm to wake up. I had not experienced 1 ounce of pain since the surgery. And like a C-section is major abdominal surgery.
Yeah.
They're laying your insides on the side of the table and then taking a child out on the other side. Like it's no joke. And I remember waking up and I was calling for the nurse to bring me my pain pills. And my husband was like, yeah, you're done. Like, nope. And like cold turkey cut me off. And when I went into my second pregnancy, I was like, I am not taking those. And I told the doctors when I went in, I'm like, I do not want oxy. I want, just give me extra strength, Tylenol and Motrin. And they still advised me to not do that. And I was like, I am willing to take a little bit of pain to not feel that dependency in like 3 days, feeling that dependency. So,
Yeah.
I recognize like how quickly that can happen for somebody and, and having the accessibility in your town with all those, pill clinics, like it's so easy to see how it can happen. And what I constantly think about is how did the doctors not know that they were creating this issue? Like what was in it for them? Like, I know we can get into much deeper conversation, but like, holy crap,
It's good to hear that you got through it, and recognize it early, because a lot of our, people we followed in the documentary didn't, right?
Yeah.
These things like gradually happened over time until it was like, oh no, it's bad, the rock bottom. And the doctors we talked to, specifically some of the emergency room doctors would tell us that for a very long time, they were being told they weren't prescribing enough of this medication, of the pain medication. And so, it was an institutional thing that no one really kind of put the brakes on and said, hey, maybe this is going to have long-term effects.
Yeah.
Right. Until it was a problem. And that's, we didn't cover it a lot in the documentary, but like they literally had to change the law here in Ohio to go after these doctors because it was perfectly legal. And, now we're starting to see, that was kind of phase 1, right? Where it's like, okay, it's these prescription pills, mostly oxy, that people are getting hooked on. Phase 2, I mean, once people are addicted and they can't get it, they go to illegal substances, which is now heroin or meth or, other substances that are out there. And so that obviously had, a lot of negative effects. And now we're in this phase 3, which is fentanyl, right? Which is harder to get, harder to get the illegal stuff. It's easier to get fentanyl in, it's cutting everything, and it's incredibly more lethal. So the problem has actually gotten worse over time.
Yeah.
And that's what we really wanted to show in the documentary is like, it's all bad, but the stakes now are higher than they've ever been before.
Yeah. I just recently had a conversation with my 2 oldest kids. My daughters are both teenagers. And I literally said to them, like, and I think it was the congressman in your documentary. He said, you can't experiment anymore. Like literally you can't experiment. And I had that same conversation with them. I just said, listen, you can try nothing. I mean, I put the scare tactic of like, it could just be in Sour Patch Kids that you get, like you have to be, because fentanyl, it's once, it will kill you. Like you will die.
Yeah.
And, we see that here I live, a hop, skip, and a jump away from Kensington. And, Kensington, Philadelphia you see videos of it all the time. It's like, it is The Walking Dead. It is the craziest scene you've ever seen in your life. And it used to just be like, that's where all the junkies live. Well, that's where all the junkies die because they're all dying now because they're taking the same shit and it's all laced with fentanyl and they're dying. And, you think about this idea where it has to be fear factor for these kids because the offset to that is you had some, and we'll talk about larger in a sec of what you're doing, but some of your recovering addicts in your documentary, and it's not the first time I've heard it, but when they're talking about the first time they did heroin or the first time they did meth, it's like, it's the best feeling in the world, right? And so that is so scary, and I'm always like, "Oh, don't say that," because, I mean, you think like a young kid is like, "Ooh, the best feeling in the world, what's that feel like?" Right?
Yeah.
And so, um, those recovering addicts are always living with the absence of the best feeling in the world, right? And compounded by the idea of like, "Eh, am I gonna just take that chance? Even though there could be fentanyl, even though it could kill me, it's still the best feeling in the world. I'm gonna roll the dice," right? So it is, like you said, Chase, the stakes are so much higher. Yeah. So let's talk about the documentary and really what you're trying to do in Portsmouth to combat the epidemic, and it started out with CrossFit. So you come back and you open this gym, and I mean, I can't imagine that you're thinking I'm like that this is all going to be about the opioid epidemic at first, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
Starting off the gym actually was way more therapeutic to me as a veteran.
right.
Like a lot of guys, you get out back to duty, you've been deployed a couple times, and almost like since you just talked about like when addicts talk about the first time they use drugs and what an amazing experience that is. Um, when you're with a unit and you're knocking down targets or you're a part of something so incredibly important, that's an amazing feeling and experience.
Yeah,
And in a way, I mean, you're always kind of chasing that too. The problem is when you leave, that switch is off.
yeah,
And you don't really people can tell you about it all they want, but until like you go from day one, you're active duty to day two, you're just Joe Schmo who no one really cares about and really doesn't care about what happened or what you did. It's difficult to reintegrate back into. Um, and so you're devoid of mission, you're devoid of purpose, and you're devoid of a community or brotherhood. Three things that were vital to you. And so early on, the gym was able to provide that to me and work through a lot of my issues. And kind of early on, the gym always had the tagline, in a town devastated by weakness, we choose strength. Um, because I wanted to take what I had learned in the military and through CrossFit and be able to provide challenge and being in discomfort to people because that's ultimately such a great tool to build competence and capability and competence. So that was kind of the mission early on. And we started working with adaptive athletes, so men and women who lost arm or leg or combination thereof, whether in combat or a civilian accident. And that's when I kind of understood like working with people that's gone through traumatic events and seeing how fitness is such a great tool for them. And then fast forward, when I started working with people in addiction, I was just like, oh, we've all gone through trauma in some capacity. We've just tried to hold on to different things as a way to numb that pain.
right.
But it was all trauma that got us there and a feeling of isolation and disconnection. And there's no better place to offer connection and camaraderie than a CrossFit gym.
Dale likes to say it. He's now proven it to me over 4 years of like everybody's equal after a horrible workout. Everybody feels the same. I'm like, there's a lot of truth in that.
It's
Where
very
you
true.
get the bone from.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because your like whole methodology is what we do at the Travis Manion Foundation. So, we lean back into a Pew study from several years ago that was like 55% of veterans. The biggest thing they're challenged with is feeling disconnected from community. And so how do you give that back to them? But you can look at different subsets of society and say the same thing, right? Like the recovering addict needs community too. I mean, everyone needs community. Like in order to thrive, you need meaningful relationships. You need a community of people. Isolation is now the Surgeon General just declared isolation an epidemic. Like literally, when have you ever isolation? The word isolation is now an epidemic. Like that.
I think he said it's like it's similar to smoking 15 cigarettes a day or something like that.
15 cigarettes. I was like, what? It's wild. And so, and you know, what we always lean back on is like, we recognize this very early on, and we would try to bring it to the VA, and, you know, and they would kind of laugh at us like, nope, what a struggling veteran needs is counseling, pills, you know, all of these. And we're like, well, there's probably more holistic approaches to, you know, to get them before they're there. Right. And I will say we've come a long way. And I think society as a whole is embracing this idea of human interaction, of community. And again, we certainly recognize at our organization the power of moving your body, of physical fitness. And that's a really heavy part of what we do. But like veterans that, you know, I always say, I think the average person looks at the veteran community as very wounded, right? Where in fact, the large majority of the veteran community sits in the middle, and it's really the extremes are on one side and the other, but there's still vulnerability in that community. And it's about recognizing those signs of when you need to intervene. Right. And so I imagine working with addicts, you had to be really, or recovering addicts, you had to be really cued in to those signs while they're in your gym, and recognizing like, hey, are they doing okay? You know, how did you learn to deal with that?
That's where Bill came in.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is the hard way. Unfortunately. But you know, luckily it wasn't something that just happened overnight. So it really started with one individual, and his name was Andrew Wright. And he was like the first guy that we worked with, that, you know, he got done with the program, and the program can only last 90 days because that's how long Medicaid will fund it. And so he's like, hey dude, like, I want to thank you, like this CrossFit stuff has been instrumental in my recovery, but I'm done with the program and just really appreciate it. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, fired up for this cat, thinking he's got a job lined up and he's going to go back somewhere and restart his life. So I said, well, what's next? He's like, I got to go to the homeless shelter because I don't have anywhere to go and I can't find a job anywhere.
Right. Didn't he say, like, if I go home, I'll start using again, right?
Yeah. So we're like, oh, so dude, tomorrow come to the gym. I'll give you a broom and a mop, and you can work out as much as you want, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah.
And kind of like due to his success, he opened the doors for, now we have anywhere from 9 to 13 people across three companies that are in recovery that work for us. But he was able to, once we hired the second person, we're able to lean to Andrew and other counselors to be like, hey, I think so and so is kind of going off the radar a little bit, to look for those signs, to be able to pull them back in. And that's why we, you know, for us, we just have one rule: show up on time and never be unaccounted for. That's it.
Yeah.
Because the day that you don't show up on time and you're unaccounted for, like, that's when it starts. And if you let 2 days go by, it could potentially be fatal, and it's too late.
Yeah.
So we try not to have a lot of rules, but the ones that we have, you got to stick to. And then the second guy, unfortunately, that came after Andrew, I mean, this is not what's in the documentary, but he relapsed, unfortunately, And a part of his relapse, like he stole my business partner's lawn tools to pawn them for drugs. So we had a decision at that point, like, what do we do now? And my immediate reaction was like, done. I don't care, like that's unacceptable. But then it really came down to, well, if everyone's like Andrew, then you, there's no difficulty to this program.
Right.
Like if they're all going to be 100% success, then this is easy. So you have to figure out what you're going to do when it's not easy. And then that's when we said, hey, like if you're honest with us, when and if you do relapse, you have to go back into treatment. You have to subscribe to whatever protocol the professionals want you to do. And then when you get through that, you'll have your job back when you come through.
What was fascinating to capture, which we got in the film, is that, you know, Dale and his team are going through this, but a lot of the gym members that have been coming for years in the community also recognize this. So you have this community learning that's happening, and because of that, now it starts to look like others realize that, oh, I need to go after, and I need to welcome those in recovery as well. So you've got everything kind of centered at the gym, but now you have other employers that are coming together, and so it's almost like kind of what we wanted to do when, you know, when we were in Iraq, when you're talking about nation building. It's like take one block, hold that block, build it, build it, build it. Like it really was that. I mean, it was like the gym was the center point, and then now you start seeing businesses start to hire people now, and you have that reason, like you said, the community, people want to stay clean to be
Right.
part of that. And that's like the long-term part of it. So it was really, really fascinating and awesome to capture.
So I don't know how much we want to get into, but like obviously for me, I watched the documentary and, you know, I was not expecting kind of what came towards the end with your counterpart in this whole endeavor.
Yep.
Was a guy by the name of Bill Devers, right?
Yep.
And you know, and I'm watching him and it's like, you know, he's the catalyst to kind of everything that's happening. So, you know, you see this amazing partnership with you and him. And then the next thing you see is this mom talking about losing her son. And I'm thinking it's like one of the guys you have employed. And I'm like, oh, which one was it? Which one? And then it was him. And I'm like, holy crap. Like that hit me out of left field. I was not expecting that. Obviously you were not expecting that either. But there was something that you said when you were reflecting on his death. And ultimately he relapsed and died of fentanyl poisoning. But you said that his death was not going to be in vain, right? It was going to mean something. And, you know, I immediately connected it with that because that's the reason the Travis Manion Foundation exists today. So like I felt it on so many levels. And, you know, you have to think that in some way, like you're living out his legacy by doing what you continue to do. And, you know, it super sad to see that it ended up that way for him. But I don't know if there's anything you want to kind of talk about with that.
Yeah. You know, this thing doesn't exist without Bill.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about Bill because he's a very central character in the entire documentary.
Wow, man.
Yeah. So let's talk about Bill a little bit. And share with the audience a little bit more about him and the role he played with all of this.
Yeah, so he's the reason the gym ever started working with the addiction community. He was my friend and my personal attorney at the time, and then he went on to take a position as the general counsel for the counseling center. And he said, "Hey man, like CrossFit's been instrumental in my own recovery. Once I get there, I really want to find a way that we can partner, and then the gym can come over to our place and provide CrossFit classes." So it was his entire idea to get this going. And the program, you know, program's very successful. You know, we're having a lot of success stories, progress. And he was just like, okay, now we got to figure out a way to scale it. Like, how do we get this and take this to different towns and the whole thing? And I'm just like, Bill, like, I'm just taking this literally like one workout at a time, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about that, how we're going to scale this, the whole thing. But that he'd always like start rubbing his hands and get all fired up about it. So it's his vision. It's his idea. And you know, tragically, he left us too soon. And he's Chase and I's good friend. So this is what we're doing is because of what he started, and now we're going to finish it.
Yeah, I mean, you know this, and you know, processing, going through the trauma and the process of grief. I mean, you know, I'd filmed these guys for 4 years. You know, honestly, I didn't even know how to use a camera when we started, so a lot of the footage is bad, but I got better. Bill was one of the first ones that, you know, started filming, and then we became friends. And literally in the height of COVID, Dale and Billy like drove with me across the country and helped me move. Right. Like we became really good friends here. And you know, and I got sold on the mission too. I could see how people were literally changing. And Bill laid out the map for this and said, you know, we got to get people fit. We got to keep them through the process of going, and then hold them accountable. And then we can build it and take it to other places. And you know, when he passed, we both kind of looked at each other. We had a bunch of footage. We had no plan. And for two military guys, like, you know, that's not the normal, but we basically looked at each other and said, screw it. Let's do it ourselves. Let's tell this story so that people know not only, you know, the vision that Bill had, but that this is possible and there's hope and that others can get through this. Right. And that's really at the end of the day, you know, at least for me, it's if we can just offer, because I know there's so many people, we heard it from moms, we heard it from people that are in recovery, that it just feels like overwhelming at times, but there is hope. And we wanted to be able to show that for others out there that, you know, if you get into a gym, that's step one.
What were your thoughts though? Like, because all I was thinking was like, here was the guy who came up with the solution and he still fell victim to the problem. Right? Like,
Yeah, it's you know, it's like finding out you know, Superman's a little vulnerable to kryptonite. Uh,
yeah.
and you know, probably one of the greatest gifts Bill unintentionally gave us was appreciating life and then understanding it can impact anyone.
Yeah.
Um, and he was the guy, you know, like he was the guy. And then he couldn't shake it. And then I guess the biggest lesson is because you know we'll get approached by moms or brothers and sisters, and all that we can tell them is, hey, you if somebody's in addiction and they're spiraling out of control, you need to live your life with them and understand that you don't want any regrets when and if they die.
Yeah.
But you also need to understand you can't put more energy into somebody's recovery than they're willing to do. So, and that's very hard, especially if you're a mother and it's your son or it's your daughter. But what you can do is be, and this is, I can't believe like I'm saying all this, but you you have to be non-judgmental, and you have to reach out, text every day, and say, hey man, if you're ready, I'll take you.
Right.
Next morning, hey man, if you're ready, I'll take you. I'm here for you. And then one of those days, they're going to respond. Because you don't want to live your life with regret and wondering if you could have done more, but you also don't want to live your life with the guilt that you enabled them
Right.
as well.
It's such a
And that's
double-edged sword. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and I think about too, because, you know, I can only imagine to your community, his loss was obviously very significant. And, you know, you guys can probably tune it back to like some of the veterans that we've lost in the military community to suicide, right? And there's a few pretty notable ones that are like, he was Superman, right? And he was the one that was teaching people how to deal with mental health challenges, and then they end up completing suicide. And so, I immediately thought about that when I saw that he had died, and it was just like, I'm sure that rocked the system a little bit in the foundation of what you had created. But I love that you guys use that as a catalyst to, move forward in a really positive way and keep going. I think that was a beautiful thing. And the way that you guys portrayed that in the documentary was pretty awesome. So, I mean, I guess I gave away a big spoiler of the piece, but
Okay.
even watching it, like it's important. And, again, for me, I was like, wait, what? Like, what, how does that happen? Like, it was just, I felt like I knew him, and I was, and then to get to that point, it was really tough. And then, but on the flip side, you look at some of the other people that you have helped that didn't have the resources initially. And I'm forgetting the young woman's name, who was really central in the piece. With Sarah. And I'm looking at her mugshot, and I'm like, whoa, like, and I mean, her mugshot, right away that she is an addict. Like, she's got all the sores on her face. And then, and then you watch her doing things on the bar that, I can't even begin to do. And I'm like, wow, like, it's pretty freaking awesome to kind of see that success and just see the power of the community and what you've created. It's pretty awesome.
I would tell you, I mean, that was a moment that I didn't know, because like I said, we'd been filming it. We didn't know what the ending was, right? We had no idea.
Right.
But we knew that when Bill passed, that was the pressure test, right? Of like, is this a thing or is it not? And what was really, not only from the filmmaker side of it, but just as a human being, watching Andrew step up, watching Sarah step up, watching people that had gone through the program that are now recognized that they're leaders in it too, right? That they have to take a leadership role and help others as they go through the process. I mean, that showed me that this was something that can go on to other places, can sustain itself, can be, taken out to other cities out there. And ultimately we kind of looked at each other, and it just so happened that people started calling and say, well, how do we do that too?
Yeah.
And I think that's the message we tried to end the film on. Another spoiler alert is that, spread the word, right? Is that these things work. And then there's the whole science behind it, which I won't get into a lot of that, but that, really that they're, when you're trying to work through an addicted brain, there's so many chemicals that come from working out that, like, you really are bouncing out that need to use.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons that this kind of adds up and works. None of us knew that at the beginning. Yeah. We had to learn that along the way.
Well, I've said it many times before. My dad's a retired colonel in the Marine Corps, Dale. And, when I was young, all the way up till today, if I tell my dad that I'm like, I'm feeling anxious or I'm not in a good headspace, he'll be like, then just go for a run. Like, that is his like prescription for everything. Well, go for a run. And, today, and I used to get really, really pissed when he would say that. And I'd be like, he doesn't understand me. He doesn't, like, he's just whatever. And now I take so much value in what he says, because, like, when I work out, I don't work out necessarily to, like, PR on something. Like, I'm not one of those people, but, like, I work out to be like, I need to level set my brain. Like, I need to be in a different headspace, and I know that this is going to fix it. I know it's going to regulate my dopamine levels, like all of those things. Like, I know the mental benefit that physical exercise has on me. And so, and I think you guys break that down a little bit in the documentary as well, but it's so true, that chemical makeup that I think for such a long time, we tried to fix the chemical dependency by prescribing more chemicals that were now prescribed drugs, right? Like, oh, you're coming off heroin, here's methadone, all of those. And again, I'm very quick to say that I do believe there is a place for meds in some way, shape, or form for mental illness and all of that. Like, but I am a firm believer that you can't have one without the other. You can't just give people a bunch of, Lexapro and say, go take this every day and not make any other changes, And I think that as a society is where we've gotten, is just like, let's fix the problem by masking it even more, So you guys have kind of uncovered the solution to that. But what I'd love to know is, like, where is Portsmouth now? Like, we see this microcosm of what you guys are doing, but and it's clearly affecting and being beneficial to part of the community, but do you see an embrace from the entire community? Like, can you actually look at the data to see that addiction and overdoses is changing in your town?
Unfortunately, you can't, and the reason is it's gotten worse nationwide.
Yeah.
We started in 2018, and then COVID hit. And so what's COVID do? Shuts everything down. It isolates people and makes things worse.
Yeah.
Because now you took away that support structure. You took away their connection, and it made things worse. Not just for people in addiction, but like remember the year 2020, like everybody was going crazy.
Yeah.
Because they were shut in. So that really kind of put a hamper on a lot of stuff. But it is getting better for the people who subscribe to the program. And like, we want to be clear, like, this is not the solution, it's a solution.
Right.
And it's just like CrossFit. CrossFit's for anyone, but it's not for everyone.
Right.
But if you really buy into it, it has the power to change your life. And this program just is very simple. It's not hard to understand. It's very difficult to execute, but we really want to get people fit and healthy. We really want to try to find them a good job around good people, and then eventually find them a good place to live. And that's a little different than current models because it's a 18 to 24 month period. It's not a 90-day thing. It's a much longer term interval approach to how we're doing. So as far as the town is concerned, I was having this conversation with somebody, like, we were the first business to open up downtown in 2013 in our like little historic district. And now in almost every building, there's a new business on 2nd Street and Market Street.
That's awesome.
So you have people returning downtown.
Yeah.
You have economic development, because people are starting to come out of that fog by getting people treated and then turning them from tax-paying liabilities into tax-paying assets. Like, personal recovery and economic recovery go together.
100%. Yeah. So what
That reminds me
Go ahead.
of, Dale was an intel guy. I was a grunt. So like back in Iraq, it would send you on these things called atmospherics. Like, go find the atmospherics, which it took me forever to figure it out. It was basically go walk around and talk to people. And if they're not shooting at you, that's a good day. Right? What's the vibe on the street?
Yeah.
The vibe on the street now is that people are out in places that, well, the first time I came here, I literally thought that this place looked worse than Iraq. It did to me. Now these, like Dale said, buildings are coming back. People are coming out. There's now people that would otherwise not talk to each other that are now friends and part of a community. And so it's hard to put a number on that other than what you visually see on a Tuesday down here at Market Street. And it's just that there's life back in, and you can feel it. And so we tried to capture some of that in the film so that you could see, the before and the afters. But I think once you get people start talking about the problem, and instead of just pushing it away and not being like, we're not even going to talk about addiction and recovery. Now it's, people are talking about it. They recognize it. And it really isn't, in a lot of ways, a lot of people, it's not a big deal. It's like, all right, cool, let's move through it. And so breeding that stigma was a big part of the lesson that I learned, throughout.
Well, I saw that too, because, I was thinking about, again, there's another gentleman, that in that I think you employ that can barely read.
Rooster.
Yes, Rooster.
Yeah.
And so, I'm thinking about Rooster and Sarah, and, in my daily life, I'm not going to come across Roosters and Sarahs, right?
Yeah.
But like, I'm just not. But if they showed up at my gym, I'm all of a sudden like almost forced to understand them, to know them, to build a relationship with them. And so I think there's like this, it's helping the recovering addicts, right? And getting them in a better place, but it's also opening up the broader community to their people too, right? And so I thought that was really an important concept that you probably weren't thinking about, but it just happened naturally,
No, yeah. Yeah, and that's the great thing. If you can, I don't know how many jobs have happened inside of my gym. And honestly, it makes sense because if you see Joe Smith, introduce yourself to him, 3 months, you guys go to the same class, you're like, that's a hard worker.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? That is the greatest like job application process there is. You get to know the person, and then you're like, hey, Joe, like, where are you working at? And then if you have an opening or availability, I'm going to take that guy over a paper resume any day. And that's consistently what we see coming out of the gym.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome stuff. I loved watching it. It's coming out October 3rd. You can catch it in a lot of different places. Apple, right? Apple TV.
TV and Amazon.
Apple TV and Amazon. And you can pre-order right now on iTunes, right? Did I see that somewhere? Okay. Look, I got my facts. But okay, after, there's the documentary, it's getting the word out, it's making people aware of, this solution, not the solution, but a solution that you have found. But what comes next for you? Are you looking to scale this into other communities? Is it about awareness for you and getting out to broader communities to try and replicate the same model?
Unfortunately, Billy started it, so we're gonna have to finish his vision, and I think that looks more of a train the trainer model.
Yeah.
So we would love to be able to package this up, have discussions, consulting with um, CrossFit gyms, behavioral health centers, local governmental organizations, and help them. There should be one of these in every city and every state eventually.
I love that. Obviously, it's the Resilient Life podcast. I always end by asking, what does living a resilient life look like for you? But before I do that, one of the things that I found so inspiring in the documentary was the city of Portsmouth and like how resilient it was as a community. We don't often talk about like resilience in this like amorphous way, but really I thought you guys highlighted that so beautifully. The resilience of a community and the power of its people coming together to, listen, you guys show the footage and Chase, the footage at the beginning of the film, I'm like, I remember when you told me you were moving to Ohio from LA, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, where are you going? Like Columbus? You're like, no, outside of there, and this small town, and you see that footage at the beginning, and I'm like, oof, like, whoa, it's rough, and to see what you guys are doing, have done, and are continuing to do, it's pretty awesome. So I just wanted to say that, but let's turn it over to you guys individually. I'll start with you, Dale. What does living a resilient life look like for you?
Well, I think it's a line from the If poem where he says, if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those imposters the same. To me, I think that's what best embodies a resilient is don't get too high on the highs, don't get too lows on the lows, and just be even keel and treat those imposters the same.
You know, Jocko also gave that same, he didn't say that quote, but he said, I never let the highs get too high or the lows get too low. And I was like, come on, sometimes you got to let the highs get high.
You could enjoy it. You didn't want to see that in the documentary?
Sorry, we gotta go back and edit it.
We'll throw this in. We'll send you the footage. You can put that in.
I can't believe I remembered a line from a poem,
know.
by the way.
I like it. Chase, what about you?
Yeah,
Good luck.
Yeah, this was a 4-year project that, you know, like I said, there wasn't really a plan, but I think we always instinctively knew that we needed to get this story out to the world. However, we were going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. It more from a TV show to a documentary to maybe just put on the internet. Who knew? Right. I think, you know, the aspect of resilient life that came to me is I didn't know exactly how we were going to get it done, but I knew that I had that purpose at the end of it. So when things came up that got in the way, and I can get, you know, this is a much longer conversation, but it's like, you know, when we were dealing with, I don't know if we're going to make enough time. I don't know if we're going to have enough money. I don't know if we're going to have this. I don't really know. I don't know the answers to a lot of these questions, but what I do know is that I can keep pushing and can keep focused on the end of that. And that's what allowed me to be resilient throughout the process. And there were highs and there were lows, and, you know, I have my time to kind of help me through that. And so that's, I think, what it you know, got us to this point. And, you know, we'll take it from here.
Yeah, I talk him off the ledge, and then he talks me off the ledge.
I love it.
Nice.
Well, I will finish by saying there's one thing you're missing from your CrossFit gym, and that is executing the Manion WOD in the month of April. I notice you guys are not a participating affiliate, so we'll talk offline about how you
We
guys can.
We'll square that away.
Yes, that's my one ask. But thanks so much for joining. So the documentary comes out October 3rd. Apple, Amazon, pre-order now on iTunes. I watched it, guys. It's awesome. You don't want to miss it. Chase and Dale, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.